Hello, BookTube. All right, we're continuing our read-along of the Dune novels of Frank Herbert. I belatedly finished up God, Emperor of Dune, and now we're doing the next book in the series, which is Heretics of Dune. This is these gorgeous, slightly oversized Ace paperbacks, just fantastic. I love them. I got the whole set from Ace. Unbeknownst to me, I didn't know I'd be doing a read-along of all these. I'm doing this. This is DuneTube, and I'm doing this in conjunction with a few other booktubers we're doing one Dune book a month until the end of the year, and we're closing in on the end. Heretics of Dune is the second to last Dune novel, and the cover has a girl standing on a sandworm. Again, a wonderful choice of cover illustration. Who are these by? Jim Tierney is the illustrator here. Amazed that I've gone through 4 novels and haven't known that. But we saw in God, Emperor of Dune a marked departure from the first 3 books. Frank Herbert has no compunction about letting time pass between books in series. A good deal of time passes between the end of Dune and the beginning of Dune Messiah. A few more years pass between the end of Dune Messiah and the beginning of Children of Dune. And then there's a huge gap. Between Children of Dune and God, Emperor of Dune, there's a gap of 3,500 years. And one character spans that gap. Leto II, the God, Emperor of Dune, the tyrant. And at the end of God, Emperor of Dune, he dies, and his iron control on the galaxy is broken. And this book, Heretics of Dune, takes place 1,500 years later. 1,500 years after the tyrant went back into the sand. And lots has changed. A lot has changed. Leto II, in God, Emperor of Dune, predicted some of the changes. He predicted that once his rule was over, humanity would scatter to the stars and to the far barbaric reaches past the reach of the Imperium, and sunder, that there would be famine and hardship, and that happened. And in the Imperium itself, there have also been some changes. All of the institutions that we have known in the course of the Dune books that only barely survived the tyranny of Leto II, the God Emperor of Dune, are still around. The Ixians, with their illicit technology, the Bene Tleilaxu, with their illicit biology, still producing Duncan, Idaho clones regularly. Now they produced them for the Atreides. Now they produce them for the Bene Gesserit, an all-female sociological society that also continues. All of these forces are still around. They're still jockeying for power and position with each other, even though the God Emperor is long gone. And also, spice is now, the spice melange that gives all of these people enhanced abilities is now manufactured artificially. So the whole dynamic there has changed as well. There's no longer one person. The person who controls the planet Dune no longer controls the spice. And there are sandworms on Dune. Dune is not entirely a desert planet anymore, but there are wild sandworms on the planet now where once there weren't. And as this book opens, we see a couple of X factors that are connected with that. One of them is directly connected with the planet Dune, with the sandworms. A character named Siana is a young girl who appears to have the ability to communicate with sandworms. Keep in mind, that wouldn't have been possible before the God Emperor. Now the sandworms have rudimentary sentience. They're still animals, but they have rudimentary sentience. It wouldn't have been any more possible to communicate with them in the days of Dune than it would be to communicate with mosquitoes. But now it is possible, and this girl seems to be able to do that. That is intensely interesting to the Bene Gesserit and a whole bunch of other people. Also, on the planet that used to be Gedi Prime, the homeland of the Harkonnens, there is the new Duncan, Idaho Gola, who's just a boy, and who appears to have changes done to him at the request of the Bene Gesserit. The Bene Tleilaxu have incorporated new physiological traits into this Duncan, Idaho, to make him faster and stronger, enough to bring him up to level with the advanced humans that the God Emperor selected breeding for thousands of years created. So this Duncan Idaho is not a relic anymore. In the God Emperor of Dune, one of the characters refers to that Duncan Idaho, the Duncan Idaho in that book, as just an older model, obsolete. This Duncan Idaho might not be that, but he's just a boy, and there are a lot of forces that want him dead. the Bene Gesserit are protecting him, but they also want to bring him to maturity because they're kind of hoping that maybe they can mate him with Fianna and see what happens. So the Bene Gesserit are still involved in their centuries-long breeding programs. And they have a military man, a Bashar, who is 300 years old. His name is Miles Teg. And they have relied, the Bene Gesserit have relied on him. He himself is not, he's not an acolyte, he's not a slave. He is instead a military commander in their employ. They relied on him for all of those 300 years. He's a genius, a military genius. And he takes on the task at the beginning, in the beginning chapters that we're reading today, of safeguarding the Duncan Idaho Gola, and maybe even providing a kind of quasi-father figure, maybe. And part of the great atmosphere of danger involved here involves that scattering that I mentioned, where that Leto predicted, that many humans would scatter out into the void, and who knows what would happen to them in thousands of years. Who knows what they would encounter out there and how they would change. And now, in this book and in its sequel, the people from the scatterings are coming back. They're coming back into the old Imperium. And one of those groups, one of the groups returning, is an amazing and terrifying creation on the part of Frank Herbert. They're called Honored Matres. And they are kind of like feral Bene Gesserit. They're all women. And instead of manipulating psyches and memories and religions, they manipulate sex, and they manipulate people through sex. And they themselves are crass and savage and unbelievably physically able. In the chapters that we're reading today, it becomes obvious that they have mastered the ability of autonomous reflexes for the whole body. So, you are exposed to a bright flash of light, you autonomously blink, right? You don't think to blink, you just blink. It happens automatically. But your trained reflexes, chopping at someone's throat, attacking the back of someone's knee, that sort of thing, reacting to danger, a lot of times those reactions aren't autonomous in normal human beings. And so you can catch someone by surprise, and you can also blindside someone. And the Honored Matres seem to have overcome that. They are extremely physically dangerous, extremely so. And they are coming back from the scattering. And they want what the Bene Gesserit have, including sophistication, which is the most dangerous thing in the world for someone to want from you through violence, because it's not a product of taking you, right? It's the classic template of the barbarian hordes impinging on Rome. They want things they can't have just by taking. It takes time to create these things. It's an incredibly intricate dynamic that Herbert sets up here between the Bene Gesserit, the conflict between the Bene Gesserit and their horrible mirror image, the Honored Matres. And that is the setup of this book that we get into now. It's a bit longer. The Heretics of Dune and Chapter House Dune are kind of long. So we are going to be reading, I think we said 200 and so pages a week. So that was, today we read up to, let's see here, the chapter that starts with, immediately after Taraza and her party left Gamu, Teg threw himself into his work. Gamu is the keep where the Gola is, Miles Teg is the Bashar for the Bene Gesserit, and Taraza is the Reverend Mother Superior. We meet a few Bene Gesserit in the course of this book. There's a Reverend Mother Schwangiu, who's the commander of the keep where the Duncan Idaho Gola is being kept. And there are a few other Reverend Mothers who will become very important in the course of this book. We learn a lot about the Bene Gesserit in this book and its sequel. A lot. About this modern Bene incarnation. And it's fascinating to read this book, especially these first few chapters, and see how people remember God Emperor of Dune. Because in God Emperor, the world was very static. We were coming into that book looking at a tyranny that had been around forever, just forever. Thousands and thousands of years, and that's been gone for a long time. And it's been gone for long enough for all the people involved to wonder about what it meant. And no one wonders that more than the Bene Gesserit. Because Leto was in part their own making. accidentally, of course, they didn't expect that he would become a tyrant that would almost destroy them any more than they expected the Kwisatz Haderach, who was his father. Both of those things were in their way exponents of Bene Gesserit manipulation. So they're wary and also curious to see if it can happen again. Some people never learn. So we're gonna stop there for today and read along. So we're gonna read 200 more pages. That will bring us, roughly speaking, the chapters in the Dune novels aren't numbered, so these read-alongs are always a little imprecise. But let's see where we're going to be here. Okay, so we will go next time. We will go roughly to the chapter that starts with "The worm did not slow its relentless progress until just before dusk." So we'll read until then for next time, and next time will obediently take place on a weekend instead of on a Monday. so I want to know what you're thinking. Those of you who are sticking with it, who've been going on along, what do you think of Heretics of Dune? Were you kind of expecting that any novel that took place in the shadow of God Emperor of Dune, even 1,500 years later, would be more different than what we expected? Or were you pleased that things are largely the same? The sort of tapestry of Heretics of Dune is largely the same as the background tapestry of God Emperor of Dune, except that God Emperor isn't there. What did you make of that? Did it surprise you? So we're done with the first part of Heretics of Dune. We're just going to continue on. We'll be reading Heretics of Dune in November. So we'll move on from there, and I will wrap this up. But I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.